Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Independence Day to all. Today, ITPI MRC Mumbai are conducting a webinar on implication of Environment Impact Assessment 2020 on ecology and economy. On this occasion, our most respectful, humble to everyone, the father of Indian town planning, none other than Dr. D.S. Meshram sir, is the chief guest of today's webinar. Dr. Meshram sir always have curiosity about the present and future happening in planning process and always gives his expert opinion to the planners and the nation. I welcome him for today's webinar as a chief guest. I welcome Sri Milind Patil sir, Vice President of ITPI and moderator of today's webinar. I welcome Sri Pradeep Kapoor sir, Secretary General ITPI, who is always happy to help the planning fraternity. Sri Kapoor sir is always with Dr. Meshram sir to help and keep smooth coordination with all the regional chapters in India. I welcome him as the guest of honor for today's webinar. I welcome all the council members of ITPI. I welcome today's eminent speakers, Ms. Anagha Paranjape Purohit and Sri Rishikesh Kolatkar for giving valuable presentation to us on such an important topic. Last but not least, I welcome all the participants who are attending today's webinar. Now, I would like to invite Sri Milind Patil sir to begin the process. Thank you, and once again, Happy Independence Day.
Good afternoon, everybody, and have a happy Independence Day. Now, as we all are aware that MOEFCC has recently published a notification on Environmental Impact Assessment 2020. At so many platforms and forums, the detailed discussion has already been going on, and on the subsequent the topic, ITPI MRC has also decided to have the webinar on the implications of EIA 2020 on ecology and economy. On this basis, we have invited two speakers. Both are very eminent and experienced speakers and have a lot of experience. With their experience, they can share their views and as well as presentations. Now, therefore, it is necessary or important for urban planners and development professionals to understand the provisions of Environmental Impact Assessment 2020 notification and take a balanced approach towards development. To start with this, I would request, I will just now explain the today's order of webinar. The webinar, first of all, the presentation will be carried out by all two eminent speakers. Thereafter, the question answer session will be conducted. Those who are online, they can pose the questions, ask the question to our speakers online, and those who are not able to connect, or they can pose their questions through their SMS. We can jot down, select some typical questions. Our treasurer Harshal Baviskar will jot down all the questions and he will pose the question thereafter. After the question answer session, our Honorable Pradeep Kapoor sir, the Secretary General ITPI, will express his views. Thereafter, our chief guest Dr. D.S. Meshram sir and President ITPI will have a concluding session of today's webinar, and none of the last least, but the last thing is of vote of thanks will be done by our Secretary Sri Dhananjay Pawar. So I request all the participants to mute their phones during the presentation, as well as those who want to ask the question, he can only unmute his mic so that his voice and the question and the presentation should be audible to all the participants. Now, on this background, I will introduce the presentation will be in two sessions. First of all, to know the notification provisions of notifications of EIA 2020. Mrs. Anaga Paranspe, she is a partner of VKE Environment LPP Pune as well as Trustee Sustainable Initiatives Pune, will deliver her presentation, and thereafter the second speaker, Mr. Rishikesh Koletkar, he will talk about most of the things relating the implications of this EIA on ecology and economy. So with this, I request, before requesting first speaker, Mrs. Anaga Paranspe, I would like to introduce her, that she is an architect by graduate and PG in environmental planning from Arizona State University. She has a vast experience of field of environmental planning of 17 years. She has worked in India as well as internationally in US and Sweden. Similarly, Anaga Madam fulfills multiple roles as business leader and entrepreneurship in her firm. As a partner of VKE Environmental LPP, Anaga leads the environmental assessment team and presents real estate projects for environmental clearances. She is an ECBC master trainer and has undertaken the pilot ECBC project by Bureau of Energy Efficiency, Government of India. Not only she is an expert in the field of environment and all these things, but she is active in local urban politics and policy actions for developing better urban plans and infrastructure. Anaga is also associated with Mamata Foundation, a charitable trust that provides shelter for orphan HIV positive children in Pune. So it is our privilege that such eminent speakers we have got to deliver such lectures on this EI impact of EI 2020. So I request Mrs. Anaga Paranspe to start her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for a very kind introduction. Let me begin first by sharing my screen so that I put up my presentation. While I do that, respected Dr. D.S. Meshram, sir, Mr. Milind Patil, Vice President of ITPI, Mr. Pradeep Kumar, Secretary General of ITPI, and Mr. Jitendra Bhople, thanks for this opportunity for me to present this to you. I know this EI notification is in controversy, and I think that's why this presentation and the kind of erudite participants that we have today who are in the technical field, this presentation is very important, because while we have at the background a lot of media reports and a lot of issues being raised, it is important for us technical people to really look at this in a very systemic way, look at what the government needs to do, understand the core issues, and only then probably object, make suggestions in a studied manner to MOEFCC, rather than getting swept up by the media frenzy, I should almost say, that is happening for this notification. And in my presentation, you will find both. You will find that I am also putting up the good points of this EI notification, and I'm also making some very critical suggestions and objections to MOEFCC from having practiced this for the past 10-12 years into the field and appearing for and preparing environmental impact assessments. So thank you once again, and I will now begin my presentation. Yes, so like I said, my presentation will focus more on what is the comparative? Because the first news media, the first news that hit us all was that it was a big dilution from 2006, that the EI notification of 2006 is greatly diluted, and the EI 2020 notification has been prepared. So, as an expert and somebody who is working in this field, I was very keen to know that how this dilution has happened, where has it happened, is it justified, or do we really need to tell MOEFCC that no, this dilution is not acceptable. So in order for me to first understand these issues, I made this comparative study, which I would like to share with all of you. And I'm sure some of you may have some different take on it, but I would like to present my view to you on this. But before we move into the actual clause-wise understanding of the notification, let us first understand the intent and scope. See, because most of the times any legislation is put forward, it looks like it is expected to do the world. For example, this one notification has a very specific scope, and the kind of environmental degradation that we see around us today is not only dependent on this one notification. There are so many allied notifications and their weak implementation that is probably causing this whole environmental degradation around us. To really put only one notification in spot and say that this is the reason why everything is going wrong is what I felt was, wrongly placed by the media. And, there were a lot of media reports which also said that this one single notification is going to cause the end of forests in our country, is going to ensure that no Western Ghats are left. It is going to erode the entire soil of our country. And it is really MOEFCC is seeking to just make any illegal activities legal into this country. And I think that was a little unfair, because this notification has a very specific scope. And what is it? That if a developmental project is happening, and those developmental projects are also defined by the notification, this notification asks all the project proponents, and this is including the government or anybody who is looking to put up the project, to assess and anticipate its environmental impacts prior to its establishment, make relevant changes as may be necessary, because once you start assessing environmental impacts of a project, the project proponent also realizes that there are some things that we may need to change in a project. So the EIA process is also used to enhance your project. This is placed in front of the government to scrutinize this project. So government has a role where a project proponent is coming in front of them with a certain plan, with the benefits of the project, the environmental impacts of the project, and the project proponent is telling them that these are the ways I will try to at least avoid, reduce, or compensate the environmental impacts that I will have. The government looks at all these interventions, and based on the environmental management plan, agrees that, okay, this development project looks like this is a necessary project. So for example, I'm an architect, I may put up a project for a building. So the government will say, yes, housing projects are needed. So let's look at the EMP and whether this project should be allowed or not allowed. Based on what I have given as an environmental management plan, the government can monitor and put in a management mechanism to ensure that whatever I have committed is going to actually happen on site. And when government has an entire understanding of all those projects that are coming up, the government has a good idea of what the resource allocation is going to be. So say, for example, if 100 projects are being approved for housing in a particular area, the government automatically gets an information that they need to give water supply to this kind of a project. So really speaking, the scope of the EIA notification is quite fixed. It is focused on certain things, and that's what we should assess this EIA notification for. What were the problems in EIA notification 2006? Why do we need after 14 years, why do we really need to change? And I'm sure as a part of participants, there are a lot of government planners as well who would know that after a few years, you know that a certain notification is working in some areas, it is not working in some areas. Some things are left vague in the earlier notification. They are not adequately clarified. There is discretionary powers that are being used. So we need to bring them all together based on the entire experience of 14 years. And these were some of the prominent issues of EIA 2006. One is the procedural complexities were not identified. The procedure, see, it was our first attempt to put an EIA notification in place. So we didn't know where the complexities of procedure are going to occur. Because of these procedural complexities, a lot of people went to the courts of law. And then the courts of law gave a variety of judgments across all the states, depending on that particular project or the specificity of the context. All these further added to the whole confusion, because you have different states looking at different court verdicts, high court verdicts, and then there were also some Supreme Court verdicts. So we needed to bring all of this together. Further, because the procedure itself, started evolving as we started implementing this EIA, many circulars and office memorandums were issued for the government employees themselves on how to tackle such kind of issues. So these OMs and these circulars had to be put in, brought in together. Timelines were pretty vaguely established in 2006. I mean, if you read 2006, you never get a sense of time as to what exactly, in how much time is this going to be over. And that was a major problem. Then specific scrutiny parameters are not laid down. So a project proponent, for example, doesn't know, or an EIA consultant doesn't know that if I present a project in a certain way, how will it exactly be scrutinized? And hence it led to a lot of ad hoc assessments over time and over geographic areas. Monitoring of EMPs, the provisions that the law should have to how the environmental management plan will get monitored and implemented was extremely weak in 2006. We did not have proper provisions. It just asked for some very basic requirements. That was also completely dependent on the project proponent's goodness and will to do this, and hence it remained. It was very weak, and many procedures actually were extremely ineffective. So, it's like you're doing something, you're telling people to do something, but you're finding that it is not helping us to save the environmental conservation. So it was extremely necessary to look at what procedures we have to let go because they're not working. So with this problems in the EIA notification, I think the higher committee which looked at its notification, and I happen to believe that some of these who have drafted these are very well established experts and government bureaucrats in the system, and they tried to address all these issues that we have faced in the past 14 years. While I say this, and before I jump into telling you what the clause wise comparative is, what I would like to also put forth right up front, that this is my very basic 4 large objections or suggestions to MoEFCC that still need to happen in EIA draft 2020. So one is the monitoring of EMPs still remain weak and unaccountable. We are still putting a lot of faith and trust in the public project proponent, and which we have seen that it doesn't happen. So we really need to strengthen this process, and only if we strengthen this process, the implementation part and the accountability part, only then we are going to see some change in the environment around us. Otherwise, most of the things are very nicely put in EIA reports. We have committed to everything, but it doesn't really get implemented, and we are left with actually a very bad state of the environment. Further, the notification still remains very limited. In 2006, we started off and it was a very limited scope of environmental impact assessment. But even today, when we have a chance to actually revise it, it could have become more expansive. It could have looked at, larger issues of climate change as is being expressed in a lot of opposition as well. And perhaps a lot of these issues are being addressed by other pieces of legislation, but probably a few references to such kind of initiatives could become a part of the EIA 2020. The one major thing, and as a practitioner, I think I have faced this, is that we are too focused on project level EIA scrutiny. One project is, we have a very myopic view when we do an EIA for one project. But we have to understand that along with that project, 100 other projects are also doing the EIA, and they are also committing to various different things. Now, at the government level, you really need to do a plan level EIA or a policy level EIA. So, for example, a township. When I do an EIA as a consultant for one project proponent, it is for one township. But around me, there are 6 townships that are coming forth, and 6 townships are looking at this thing in a piecemeal manner. So here is where the government or the planning needs to come up and look at if my overall township policy itself needs to be assessed for its environmental impact. And that's what I mean by when I say that a policy level EIA notification is very, very essential. It could become a part of this EIA notification, but it could also be a different piece of legislation. And with this, we could achieve a slightly better level of environmental conservation in the country. However, again, I reiterate the point that focusing right now, the draft EIA 2020 is again focused on a limited scope. And in that sense, I have now further compared it. So here you will see right from its first section, the EIA, the right hand side, the blue column that you see is the draft EIA 2020, and the yellow column that you see is the 2006 EIA notification. So again, you will see that each of these processes have been slightly done better or clarified in terms of their timelines, in the way how they should be done, how the procedures are going to happen in the draft EIA 2020. So in that sense, it has been a very good compilation of the procedure. Then there is something called as establishing terms of reference. So anytime we go for an EIA, we are given, or rather the project proponent is asked, published, is given a terms of reference, and based on these terms of reference, your environmental studies are supposed to happen. Now here you will see a very stark difference, and I don't know why this is called as a dilution, because here you will see that there was, whenever a project proponent applied for the terms of reference, there was one hearing that was conducted. They were given a 60-day deadline for the government to give them the terms of reference. Often at the end of this terms of reference, a standard TOR was given to the project proponent with a few changes or additional conditions. And the project proponent spent just 2 months, in fact, more than 2 months, just getting the terms of reference for an EIA study. Now in EIA 2020, they have very clearly said that within 7 days of application, standard terms of reference should be given to projects, except for some very crucial projects that they have retained on them. But most of the projects should be given this standard terms of reference within 7 days. For other projects, they have reduced the timelines to 30 days. Now, this reduction in timelines is on the government side. So government has to, push up its procedures, be upon its toes to give us the terms of reference in a fast manner, so that your study can happen further. Now, when an EIA is required, now this was another contending point in the opposition that we face. Now, in 2006, you actually had some two basic categories. One was category A and category B. In category B, there were only few projects which was termed as category B2, which exempted you from making an EIA. One such was building and construction projects between 20,000 square meters to 150,000 square meters. That's it. So this was just 2 categories that we had to really deal with. Now this EIA looks at the finer aspects of these categorization or the screening, as we call it, So now we have category A and category B1, and EIA is exempted for category B2. Now, please do not understand that means that whatever was expected, the EIA expected in 2006 has been exempted here. No. The same category has remained here in 2020, but category B2 projects have been added into the whole schedule, and only those category B2 have been exempted from making a full-fledged EIA study, and I will talk more about these category B2 projects later. Here you can see that the schedule has actually increased from 39 different categories to 43 different categories. So we have actually added 4 or 5 more categories to the whole EIA notification. And the project schedule also looks at many other activities and scales of activities which are not a part of the EIA 2006 notification. So in a sense, the EIA's jurisdiction or its gamut has actually increased. It has definitely expanded itself. However, they have now made additional categories to it. Public hearing. So this was another very important opposition, and I think it was in a way very right, because public hearing or public consultation is an extremely important part of this process, and it gives a chance for common citizens, stakeholders to really participate in understanding what these projects are happening and whether they directly or indirectly impact us. Now here you will see both category A and B1 projects had to undergo a public hearing, and there were these listed exemptions. Again, you have to really understand that 2006 also exempted certain projects from undergoing public hearing. And those same exemptions are actually mentioned here. And in fact, the maintenance dredging for ports has been removed from it. And what has been really added is linear projects like oil pipelines and highways in border areas where defense needs to sometimes construct work. Only there the that exemption has been added into the public hearing. Otherwise, the same requirement of public hearing is there. The second important change that has happened in public consultation, and because of which I think the opposition is happening, is expansion projects which were not specifically mentioned in 2006 are now mentioned in 2020, and they say that expansion projects with more than 50% capacity. So now let's just look at, I have already received an environmental clearance for a thermal power plant. If I'm going to add its capacity up to 50%, then I do not need an I do not need a fresh public consultation. My one public consultation has already happened, but now I don't need a fresh public consultation, but I still have to present a new environmental management plan, a new EIA study, and a new, conditions are granted to me by the government. The only aspect that has been left out for expansion up to 50%, you go above 50%, you have a fresh public consultation that is required, right? So in that sense, I felt that this was an attempt by the government to really streamline the process of delays, and often public consultation is often a critical point for delay. And for projects which had already received an environmental clearance, expansion up to 50%, only that small window of projects have been exempted for public consultation. It is not that the entire gamut of activities have been exempted. So here again, what industry is exempted? Again, there is some exemptions given to industries, but here you will find that 2006 exemptions are almost the same as 2020 exemptions. So we have not really diluted it as such. We have almost said that we are going to carry forward the same exemptions that were given to them. One quick example I will give to you is, so for example, it says that if an industrial estate is being established, say a chemical industrial estate is being established, the industrial itself undergoes a public consultation, right? So what they are saying is that now if your industry is coming inside that industrial estate, then that industry will not require a public consultation. Understood? So, the government has already scrutinized that 50 industries will come inside this industrial estate. And if you happen to be a part of that industrial estate and the government has already conducted a slightly higher level public consultation, then each industry coming inside that industrial estate will not require a fresh public consultation. So please understand these differences when we are saying that public hearing is exempted. Now, if, for example, your industrial estate is notified for as an IT industrial estate and a chemical factory is coming inside it, then you still have to go in for a fresh public consultation. So if there is a change of use, then you have to still undergo the public hearing process. So it is only when a higher level scrutiny has been conducted that a lower level scrutiny is being exempted by the government. This is again for ease of doing business, that we are all looking forward into this country, right? That we want employment to be generated. We want factories to be set up in our nation. Appraisal. I think the appraisal process has been really properly defined in EI 2020. Here, for example, it very generically said that 60 days after completion of scrutiny, but it never spoke about what is that final application and when that date kicks in. Here we still have 15 plus 45, so we still have 60 days, but they have clearly said that the government should tell the project proponent whether their application is final in just 15 days. And then the scrutiny will happen in the next 45 days. So my timeline has remained constant, but the EI 2020 has now defined that the first 15 days is for final application and next 45 days is for scrutiny. So that automatically puts a pressure on the government department and its mechanism to actually look at the projects in a faster, or rather I would say in a very proactive manner. There was no provision of this environmental permission. So I will again come to the environmental permission a little bit later. But this environmental permission is a very different connotation that has been now introduced into EI 2020. And detailed requirements have been put down for expansion projects. SESC scrutiny, how the state committee or the central committee is going to scrutinize the projects. Detailed procedural norms have been established now for the first time. They were not there, and hence the scrutiny tended to be varying. So if I was appearing for a project in Karnataka versus Maharashtra, there was a very differing level of scrutiny that was happening. There was no parity across the country. So now all that is being put in place. Just a schematic representation. I think such kind of a flow diagram was missing in the EI notification 2006. Now they have put in place, so people are very clear. You may not see this at the time of, right now on the screen, but you can read it in the notification, and it very clearly tells you how and where you are supposed to go, making the whole process more clear and less open for discretionary decisions. Now let's understand this category B2. There's been a whole lot of hue and cry about exemption, that so many projects are exempted from EI. That is actually not the case, is what I find. I will give you a quick example here. Now, River Valley projects, which were less than 25 megawatts, hydroelectric projects, were out of the purview of EI notification 2006. So if I was doing a hydroelectric project of 20 megawatts, I didn't need to go to the Ministry of Environment and Forest. Now, all these smaller scale projects have been tagged as category B2. Right? So they have expanded the scope of the EI notification 2006 to include small and medium scale enterprises as well. Here you will see what are these new additions. So lead acid battery manufacturing was not a part of EI notification 2006, that has been added. Paper, which is made from waste materials, agro waste, any other waste that goes into paper, that was not a part of the EI notification 2006, but that has been now put in B2 because you want people to use waste in paper, but you still want to regulate them. So it's better to put them in a category which doesn't penalize them too much. Industrial estates only above 500 hectares was a part of 2006. Now smaller industrial estates will also come under the purview of EI notification. Elevated roads and flyovers, this was a point of contention. Say, for example, in Pune, we have elevated roads being proposed. EI was not a requirement for such roads. But now the government has realized that even within municipal limits, when such roads are put as a part of their development plans, somebody needs to assess its overall environmental impact. And hence, these have been now added into the 2020. So there is a definite expansion of EI notification from 2006 to 2020. So when people said it's a complete dilution, I beg to differ, because it's definitely not what I see clause-wise when we are analyzing it. And here you will see these are all the industries as B2, so which was not a part of 2006. 22 new industries have become a part of EI notification 2020. They were not a part of EI 2006. And only 5 or 6 existing categories of EI notification 2006 are made slightly less stringent. I will share with you what is made less stringent here. Okay, so now here you will see that the secondary metallurgical or non-toxic metals foundries, their threshold has been increased from 30,000 tons per year to 1 lakh tons per year. SMEs for paint and varnish manufacturing. So this has been put as category B2. Highways and expressways, actually their expansion has been put in B2. So highways and expressways needed to be done an EIA, but their expansion from 25 kilometers to 100 kilometers have been put as B2. Aerial ropeways. So, you know, here you have to understand that over the years, we've understood that aerial ropeways is a very different kind of a transportation mechanism. Probably, you know, you may have very few instances of such aerial ropeways. Roads are avoided in this case. Movement of vehicles is avoided in this case. And hence, probably the ministry felt that aerial ropeways is actually a better communication system and a less polluting communication system. And hence, it has been shifted from category A to B2. And building and construction projects, which are between 20,000 square meters and 50,000 square meters, have been put into B2. They were also initially in B2 itself, but they required an state level committee scrutiny. Now they have been removed. So they will be given environmental permission rather than an environmental clearance. So what is this environmental permission? You know, so environmental permission is right now being given to only projects which are 20,000 square meters to 1,50,000 square meters. If after 50,000 square meters and 1,50,000 square meters, your project is a certified green building. So someone else is also monitoring your building and you have certified it green, then they are saying then the ministry will take a slightly back seat and assume that they are going to follow green building practices and hence their pollution load is going to be reduced. So we will give you that benefit. The second thing which was already a part was educational institutes, hospitals and hostels for education. So these have been also put into environmental permission. But anytime you go above construction of 1,50,000, then you have to still do a complete EIA. It is not a full exemption, it is only exemption for a particular threshold. What does this EP do? So EP says that you will have to still submit a proper environmental management plan. You still have to undergo all the requirements for reduction of environmental pollution that arises because of your project. But we will assume that the local municipal corporation, which actually gives you permission and is responsible for your water supply, drainage, and waste, we will make those DCRs slightly more stringent and give you that environmental permission, and you do not have to come for scrutiny at the state level. So that is the only exemption, or I would say that is the only procedural benefit that these construction projects are getting. Grant and rejection, I think everywhere the timelines have been reduced, but we have to understand that these timelines are more focused on making our government departments more responsible and more time efficient than anything else, because, you know, as a project proponent, you want everything yesterday actually. So even a day's delay is sometimes not, project proponent doesn't want even a day's delay, and whatever is required for that project's fulfillment, that is prepared. Okay, government says 10 days, we will do it in 8 days. But here the reduction in the timelines is for the government machinery to become more efficient. And then there are some other smaller, finer points which were not addressed in 2006. So for example, amendment of projects was not spoken up at all. So if, for example, if I was going to add 1 kilometer road extra length to my sanctioned or my, for a road project which has got environmental clearance, I had to go for a complete environmental clearance again. So your amendment procedures are now laid down so that, you know, stage wise, 10% amendment, 20% amendment, 40% amendment. If you're going above 50%, you have to go through the whole process again. I think in interest of time, I'm going to rush a little bit, but I would request ITPI to share this presentation with all the members or all the attendees so that they can have at their own leisure, look at the smaller, finer points of this notification. And what I've put here in the green part, the green thing now starts, is my suggestions and objections to MOEFCC. That, you know, we need to further clarify this EIA notification to make it slightly better, slightly more, less discretionary, and allow, multiple environmental clearances to be given to the same project again and again. So any kind of faster amendments which do not add to the pollution load will be looked upon as fast projects. Validity, I think one of the letters by the ex-minister spoke about validity of the EC, and I felt that it's it's just a matter of 3 years. We already have a validity of 7 years to our environmental clearances, and now that is getting extended to 10 years and 15 years for irrigation projects. So as you know, irrigation projects are long-term projects, but for others, it is just an addition of 3 more years to the whole process, and it's going to save. And in that process, the government can still intervene. It's not like the government is leaving the projects to the mercy of anything, but the extension has been given that for instead of the projects coming back to the government every 7 years, it has been now extended to 10 years. Post monitoring, yes. So this is one aspect where I have made some very critical suggestions to MOEFCC as well, that while we establish all the procedural part, we establish how the EIA should be, we have established the timelines. If our implementation remains weak, if our implementation system or mechanism remains weak, we are still left with environmental degradation outside. Because I know as a consultant, and I'm sure Hrishikesh Kolatkar after me will also agree, that we put the most fancy things into the EIA, and of course, we put the factual things as well, but we always commit. We sometimes also tend to overcommit in the EIA. Now, if I have made an overcommitment in an EIA, the government should actually check it. They should make the project proponent liable, and hence the project proponent will also not overcommit, and whatever is getting committed will also get implemented on ground. And I think this aspect, which was totally weak in 2006, is now gained a little bit of strength in 2020, but it still needs further strengthening as to how we are going to check compliance with whatever we have committed as an environmental management plan. So here you can see again a few changes and few provisions that are made for implementation, but I think the notification or further clarification to that can definitely make this more clear. Violation cases, yes, this is another aspect that has been discussed, that post de facto environmental clearance for projects which have violated the norm. So because as you know, our environmental impact assessment studies are prior to an environment or to putting up a project, and if somebody has violated it, then why are we giving them environmental clearance? I think I'm going to speak not as a consultant or as a project proponent here, but from the government's viewpoint. Let's see, we have to still understand that that project has come up. Now we either need to break it down, pull it down completely and waste all the resources that have gone into it, or it would be a good idea to transfer it or transform it into the way that we want it to happen. If the project is able to do all those requirements, pay those penalties that are due to the government, and can now be deemed as a project which conforms to all the conditions of environmental clearance, then we will give that project a post de facto environmental clearance. This is particularly important for public infrastructure projects, because public infrastructure projects are time sensitive, need to happen on the ground very fast, and this will be very relevant to planners today who are attendees, that we need to put up that road as fast as possible, because our studies are for this year, and if the project gets delayed by 5 years, our traffic counts have gone for a toss, and we see this happening all around. So I think, although I am also a little concerned about the post de facto environmental clearance being accorded, I think the provision to how to regularize these projects is very important. Non-compliance, again, like I said, it needs to be strengthened. I will not focus on that. And then these are some of the additional things which are completely new to EIA notification 2020, not a part of things. So for example, appeal against the environmental clearance or environmental permission. No such appeal provision was given. So today, for example, if I want to appeal against a project being given an environmental clearance, I had no way. This actually gives me a chance to make that appeal. Again, cluster, if many projects are coming close to each other, government can decide to form their cluster and actually make the environmental study for the cluster. So such kind of things are now included in the EIA notification. With this, I thank you. I think I have overextended my time a little bit. I again thank ITPI for this opportunity, where I could put all this in a very technical manner and in front of technical attendees like you all. And I hope that all of you also make additional suggestions and objections to the ministry, because I think this is a very vibrant process in our democracy that we need to voice our opinions. However, I urge you to study the EI notification and make suggestions and objections which are relevant and technical in nature. So with this, I just share with you the two notifications, that is 2020 and 2006. These are available in PDF. You can download the copies and see them for yourself. Probably you can also write to me if I'm making a mistake somewhere in my technical analysis. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, madam, for your detailed and informative presentation, which emphasize on the intent scope of EI 2006 and 2020. And also you have emphasized in problems in EI notification 2006, issues unaddressed in draft EI 2020. Basically, monitoring is the main remains weak and unacceptable. Later on, you also emphasize on the comparison of EI notification of 2020 and 2006. Basically, in respect of stages, copy, TOR, public hearing, appraisal process, and later on you also emphasize on understanding various categories in draft EI 2020 on the project base. So thanks a lot for giving such detailed and informative presentations. Definitely, as per your suggestion, we will uh, really give the suggestions to the MOEFCC on the basis of the deliberations and the questions and the views of the participants as well as your views. Now, may I now switch over to another our speaker, Sri Rishikesh Koletkar. So, first of all, I will introduce our next speaker, Rishikesh Koletkar. He is MD of Building Environment India Private Limited. He is an architect and did his master in environment planning at Center for Environment Planning and Technology, Ahmedabad. He is working in his field for last 21 years. He has worked as environmental expert on highways, ports, industries, estate, systematic and organic chemical factories, automobile sector, coastal regulation zone, renewable energy, townships, etc. He has also worked for various funding agencies like Asian Development Bank, KfW, JICA. He is on World Bank panel as environmental expert. So now may I request our another speaker, Sri Rishikesh Koletkar, to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope I am audible.
Yeah.
I'm muted. Okay. I hope I am audible now. And thanks all the eminent personalities who are present, and thanks all members who are here to listen to this comparison of EIA and ecology and economy. I will start sharing with my presentation. Yeah, is it visible? Is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Please go ahead.
Okay, I will try to restrict my presentation to 20 minutes. And thank you, Anagha ma'am, for giving an overall view of the entire notification. And it was quite detailed one. So for me, now the job remains only to point out at some aspects where I think the notification can improve itself. So let me start with the topic which was given to me, economy and ecology. I find this diagram, which I have presented on the right-hand side of my screen, very apt for the comparison. We all know, we survive in ecology. We are part of ecology. Our food comes from ecology. So we are part of ecology. We are part of ecology. So we are within the ecology, and this is where our activities as society are, and our interaction with each other is presented in the form of economy, and economical growth is target of every individual and nation today. But somehow, whenever we talk, we always find economy and ecology always against each other. And I find this diagram apt because if you are anywhere on the blue section, if you are anywhere on the blue area, you will always find economy and ecology on opposite side. This is not just a clever diagram if you put yourself anywhere, because we believe we are coming from ecology and going towards economy. Whereas I believe if economy grows too much, can it really compensate ecology? That's a question for everybody to look at. So let me start with what I see as ecology as today. Last year was a very special year because in last year, September or October, that announcement was made that now human beings have consumed more resources than what the earth can provide in 1 year. Now it is estimated that we are consuming at least 40% more resources. We are following a capitalist model, basically, which is US, UK, and now China also. CO2 emission is a standard considered to be what kind of energy consumption we have, what kind of resources we are consuming. And if you compare India and US, then Indian per capita CO2 emission is just 1.7 tons, where US is 16.5 tons. So it is said that if all population of India and China wants to live the lifestyle of US, we need 7 more Earths, which are difficult to find. But we cannot ignore the pressure of population. Population is growing, they have needs, they have demands, and we have to fulfill that. And as our late Honorable Prime Minister Indira Gandhi said in Stockholm, that poverty is the biggest polluter. I really believe this is absolutely true. Poverty is the biggest polluter. We have obligation to fulfill requirement of so many people. So when we look at these aspects, there is just a small diagram which I want to present to you. We all know what is carbon emission. So this is a very apt graph. This shows carbon ton emission per capita of the country. This is per capita income of a country. Now you see India as a very small, tiny line here. Can you see it here? A very small, tiny line. So India's carbon emission is growing, but not at the same rate at which our income is growing. You see China going up here and then flattening down. And way above everybody is US. But that's not why I'm showing this graph. I'm showing this graph to show that from 70 onwards, US economy has grown, but not necessarily their emissions. Now, there might be other factors involved in that. They might have shifted the polluting procedures to developing or third world country. But you can see even China is also flattening. That means their income is growing, but carbon emission is not. So I think it is possible to grow your economy without affecting ecology. And as our understanding grows, now we are using legal instruments for that. And hence we come to our present topic, EIA 2020. Was 2006 a perfect notification? Not at all. It had 39 amendments and 348 OMs during its lifetime. But there is a lot of opposition to this EIA 2020. And I'm trying to look at what are the reasons. The diagram here is called Kolam, as internet informed me, by a Tamil woman. And since they couldn't go out to protest, they made a rangoli and wrote scrap EIA 2020. Kerala opposition, Maharashtra opposition, 70 lakh comments. And now Supreme Court has mentioned that you must translate your EIA draft into local language and then look for comments. So let's look at the, so as Anagha madam has already covered the majority points, I am only look at the points where I think improvement is really needed. And a couple of points do match with Anagha madam also. One of the point is compliances. Up till now, the compliance of the environmental conditions were to be submitted 6 monthly. Now it has been made yearly. I believe yearly compliance, as we all know, if the frequency of audit is reduced, the non-compliance grows. So I fear that non-compliance might grow. As mentioned by Anagha madam also, there is no consideration for climate change. Nowadays, if you do any EIA for any donor or funding agency, there is a chapter of if the project is climate resilience. That is now an essential chapter in all kind of projects. So I believe there this notification can improve. Third point is more volatile, should I say. cognizance of violation. Now, cognizance of violation can only be made by through 4 ways. Okay, at least the notification says so. If you read it, so suo motu, that the project proponent says, sorry, I violated. Reporting by any government authority, my forest department, pollution control board, MIDC, town planner, anybody, if they inform that there is a violation, found during appraisal. So the Ministry of Environment finds during the appraisal that they have committed a violation. And fourth is found during process of application by regulatory authority. So essentially it is saying that violation can be identified if identified by proponent or government. I think the notification should allow one window where a citizen can apply and say that I think this project is a violation. Yes, government does provide a window, as Madam said, that you can apply within 30 days of grant of EIA, of environmental clearance, if you have any objection. But I believe there should be a window during the execution of the project also. If the project is going on, at that time, citizens should be able to vent their opinion. Now I will come to one point, public hearing. There is a lot of hue and cry about public hearing, huge. So now if I see the notification as it is, how it is. So now I see that the time duration when you can reply, we can comment on the public hearing is reduced from 30 to 20. And public hearing is not required for following projects. I will not go into details, it's already covered. And frankly, I think this list is quite fair. Okay, it's not really extravagant. I have some objections on 31, 38 and slurry pipeline, but still it is understandable. Border areas are sensitive locations. Then why such a hue and cry? For that, I think we should really understand what public hearing in India is avoiding. And for that, I will like to take you to public hearing typically by bilateral or multilateral agencies, ADB, World Bank, JICA. These are called lenders because they lend money. And the public hearing requirement essentially means it should be free, it should be prior, it should be informed, and it should be a consent. That means people should be able to participate freely. They should know prior when the consultation is happening. They should be informed enough to participate wisely in the consultation, and it should be a positive consent. Most of the points are covered in our kind of public hearing, but where do we lack? We lack in this aspect. For any multilateral or bilateral agency, at least 3 public consultations happen, at least. One before the project starts, second when the design of the project is being finalized, and third at EIA when an EMP is ready. So the public knows way beforehand how the project is developing and what the project is. It doesn't come as a surprise at the last moment. Now let's understand how public hearing happens at our place. These are some of the projects. I think anybody who is active in environment field would know that these projects have received prominent public opposition. There were a couple of public hearings in Ratnampet district where the public hearing was destroyed by all the villagers. MPT Goa is a very unique case because one of the public hearings went on for 8 days. Okay, it's unimaginable, but it happens in Goa. So what happens? So before we understand what's the issue, let's look at a project cycle. I'm specifically talking about government kind of projects. A need is expressed or understood at some level. Okay. Feasibility conducted, whether the project is feasible. DPR of the project is prepared. Engineering calculations. EIA, social impact assessment is carried out. Land acquisition happens once everything is done. Contractors are appointed and execution happens. Now please see as this project cycle. Typically this whole cycle will take at least 5 years, okay? Because there are big projects. And understand that if you are not losing land yourself, the only place where you can voice anything is this. The only place where people can voice their opinion about any project, environmental or otherwise, is only the public hearing, which happens for 4 hours in the time of 5 years span. All the people who have conducted public hearing knows that during public hearing, we get very angry people. But their points are actually, if you count the points, are basically job, trees, might be water, might be somebody say cultural, but we don't see that. What's happening right now in public hearing is pressure of all these stages is only concentrating here. People who cannot express anything here and anything here are expressing everything here. And that's why that anger, now the window from 30 to 20, 30 days to 20 days is reduced. That's why people are angry. That there was one chance of saying something and now you're reducing that also. So I believe public hearing process in our system should grow. And that's why there's such an opposition. And there is one sentence which I think should be really, I find it's objectionable. This is a sentence. This mentions our project concerning national defense, security, and other strategic consideration as determined by central government. Won't require public hearing. So tomorrow, if central government decides that a huge oil refinery is coming up in a place and it is strategically important, public hearing won't happen. Mumbai Coastal Road, where so many cases happened. If government decides, if central government decides that it is strategically important, no public hearing. I think this determined by central government is the issue. Let there be criteria for what strategic considerations are. If the strategy, if they are clear, then people know at least what's happening. So I believe this is one point where serious amendment is really needed. I'll come to another part, building construction, though it is only one sector in the 42 sectors. At present, notification says about 20,000 square meter built up. EIA or environmental clearance is required as per the new notification. 20,000 to 50,000, the project won't go to the expert appraisal committee. You have to submit environmental management plan. 50,000 to 1,50,000, it's again getting slightly funnier. You won't require appraisal by ESC if there is a provisional certificate of green building. The word is provisional. Now I have two objections here. Provisional green building certificate is a pre-certificate. Okay, it's a pre-certificate. It is given on the intent. The notification doesn't say anything. If the final certification is not followed, then will the environment clearance be cancelled? I think it should be, but the notification doesn't mention that. The second objection is, unlike environmental clearance is yes or no. Either you get environment clearance or you don't get environment clearance. Green building certification have gradations. It's basic certification, and then depending on your performance, it can be 5-star or platinum, gold, all these ratings. The notification doesn't specify that. And that leaves us with this condition that a basic green building certification can be obtained for a building without renewable energy, without sewage treatment plant, without treatment of biodegradable waste. Okay. So we are talking about projects which are 30-acre big projects, say 14 lakh square feet construction projects, but they won't do renewable energy, they won't do STP, they won't treat their biodegradable waste. I think this will certainly affect ecology negatively. Now we come to the main crux, okay? The biggest problem of everybody who has objected: penalty for a violation. Okay, so the penalty is very clearly defined. B2 category will take 1,000 if the owner himself or herself accepts that it's a violation. If authorities find out, then it is 2,000. And same way, category 8 is 5,000 and 10,000. Okay. Now let's understand how the penalty is. I'm making very clear. Penalty is not exemption from environmental clearance. Penalty, as on today, also is calculated based on ecological damage. And this damage is calculated based on number of days when you started construction and you obtained environmental clearance. So penalty is a stopgap arrangement between your environment clearance and starting of the construction of whatever project you have. Okay. So this is no way replacing the environmental cost. Okay. But I want to really show you some comparison here. Okay. Let us, before going to penalty, let's understand what are the present costs associated with the typical environmental clearance. Fees of the environmental consultant, additional studies if they are mentioned in the TOR, pollution control equipments. If you are a factory, you will provide ETP, your bag house for air pollution control. If you are a township, you will provide STP, you will do monitoring. Might be delayed in the project because once my engineering drawing and design is finalized, I can't start the project immediately. There is a delay. Then there is CER. Just like CSR, Environment Department has introduced CER, Corporate Environmental Responsibility. It ranges from 0.0125 to 2% depending on the project cost and if the project is new or it's going for another renewal. And charges of SEIA, state government also puts some kind of charges. Now I have specifically mentioned non-negotiable to the CER and SEIA for a purpose. Because all above four depends on your negotiation in the market. Okay, you might convince the environmental consultant not to take fees, and these things can be managed. But CR is absolutely non-manageable. You have to pay that when you go for environmental clearance. Now, to understand how the penalty works, I assumed that let me see if I start a construction without environmental clearance, and I'm caught within 1 year. Okay, I'm caught by the authorities within 1 year. Okay. So what is my penalty? 10,000 rupees per day. Okay, 10,000 rupees per day is my penalty. So that translates to, I think, 36 lakh rupees per annum. Let's take this case further because 36 lakhs is a normal penalty. Might not be that effective. Let's understand what if the project proponent completes the construction without environment clearance and then goes for environment clearance. Okay, what are we looking at? As hypothetical case, I have assumed some cost, like a basic factory, 50 crore factory. I have considered construction duration 1.5. This is a suo motu, that voluntarily disclosure of violation. This is my per day cost. Based on this, this is my costing. And if I look at my percentage of the project cost, this comes here. Another factory, bigger factory, township. Township, I have considered 450 crores, assuming 15 lakh square feet of township sold at 3,000 rupees square feet, still cost you 450 crores. And I'm assuming the township will go on for 5 years. Then these are the project costs. As you see, I have specifically arranged them in ascending order. And then there are big infra projects, okay, 10,000 crore, 18,000 crore projects. So you can, again, the time period is given accordingly. And understand, as I increase the time period, the penalty goes up because the penalty is dependent on number of days and not cost of project. So if I put a simple graph, you will see that as my cost of the project goes up, my percentage of penalty goes down. Okay. I might be taking a normal case, okay, suo motu. Let's understand a higher penalty. Okay, when somebody finds out that you are violating, then the penalties go double. Okay, all these numbers are double. Percentage cost also goes to double. Let's look at the situation now. As the cost of the project goes up, my penalty percentage goes down. No matter how big my percentage is, the highest percentage is 0.4% of my project cost. Now, just to put you in perspective, all big projects generally keep 2 to 3% of the project cost aside for environmental budget. Just for comparison, again, I'm saying it is not replaceable, but just see what is the comparison with CER cost, which is again as per the project cost. So again, I'm taking the least of CER cost. For smaller project, the least CER cost is 1 if it is renewal project. CER cost is 1% and this is 0.44%. So what I really want to understand here is, or want to make you understand here is, that again, this is not replaceable, but understand this as incentive. Can you see what kind of incentive are we providing to the project proponent to start construction and then apply for environmental clearance? Of course, the proponent will have to pay these costs later on, all the costs which I mentioned. But don't we know how much advantage the project proponent have to start the construction immediately? Haven't we all seen it? You all are planners. You have seen that. As everybody wants the project to start today because there is cost, there is market. So I believe this is what's happening here. Now, if I come to the topic given, ecology and economy. So if I see some aspects of this notification, I definitely acknowledge that this project will increase the economical activity. Yes. Easy start for new projects. Less chance of the project getting stopped for environmental issues, as earlier mentioned by Anga Madam, that if you increase within 10% of your production capacity, you can still get environmental clearance without going to the department. What I fear is the social opposition may grow, because as you suppress people's voice, the anger may find their vent in different places, and sometimes the social repercussion might turn ugly and nasty and violent. So that's what my fear is. If I look at ecology, I believe because of this, people will not treat pollution immediately. More uncontrolled exploitation of the resources, and sometimes the ecological damage can be long term. Let's assume, as I mentioned earlier, a township, a 15 lakh square feet township will take at least 35 acres of land. The 35 acre of land had greenery, had trees. All the trees are eradicated, construction started, then went for environmental clearance. These compensation, and of course there is a provision of ecological damage calculations. Will these calculations and amount and these cost will convert, will be able to put that kind of greenery somewhere else? That's a question we all need to ask ourselves. Before closing, I would like to just give you one analogy. A very interesting study which was carried out in Israel about daycare centers. Okay. As you know, when in developing countries or developed countries, husband and wife both are working, they don't have time for kids. So kids are put in daycare center. And typically daycare center will have particular timeline, okay, that you drop them at 9 o'clock and pick them at say 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Suppose husband or wife cannot make to by 7 o'clock. What generally they do? They call and they apologize, say sorry, I'm just coming in half an hour, please hold on, okay. You go, you say sorry, you pick your kid, you come home. One social experiment was carried out in Israel to understand how the behavior changes with penalty. Okay. So in some of the daycare centers, they introduced a small penalty, per hour. It's very small amount, but per hour. That for every extra 1 hour, you have to pay more. Okay. And then the results were studied, whether the behavior has changed or not. The behavior definitely changed. Now, husband and wife who were rushing from the office to the daycare center, now they go out, they finish shopping, and they come to pick their children. And when they were asked, why are you doing so? They said, we are paying. We are paying for the facility, extra facility which we are taking from you. The small penalty made them change the behavior, that as if whatever suffering was being added was paid by some amount. I think I will close at this fitting analogy. The wrongdoers were the parents, the sufferer were the kids, and payment was made to the daycare center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rishikesh, for giving such detailed presentation regarding the ecology and the economy. And you have some fear and objection regarding the EIA 2020 regarding the green building certification, the categories, gradation of the green building certificate. Then you express your views in your presentation regarding penalty is just like a stopgap arrangement, and it may lead to incentive to the project proponent. And you also emphasize the various by giving some cited some practical as far as public hearing is concerned, and you also express your views. If the hearing period is reduced, then ultimately it will lead to a social impact of if you suppress the voice of the society. So thank you very much for your enlightening this presentation. Now I request all the participants to ask the questions if you are online. Imran, can you help in this matter? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Whom you want to take?
If anybody wants to ask the questions or online. Hello.
Milind, I will suggest you that take the questions from chat box. Many
Yes,
people
we
are,
already. Yes, we already jotted down some questions.
if you put open house, it will be difficult to handle the situation.
Right.
So it's better you take the questions from chat box.
Yes, we already jotted down some questions from the chat box. Now I request our treasurer, Sri Harish,
Harshal can put
Harshal Bhaviskar, to select some of them and just please pose the question in front of the speakers. Please, Harshal Bhaviskar, treasurer.
Harshal, you are mute. Unmute yourself.
Shall you unmute yourself? Hello.
Yes, the first question is from Vishal Patil, sir. Are any new types of infrastructure projects?
Be louder, slightly louder.
Are any new types of infrastructure projects brought under the purview of EIA?
Are you asking me, should I answer any new infrastructure projects? You said, I couldn't hear you. No, your mic is not working, I think.
One question I can read out, which is probably addressed to Rishikesh.
Yes, sir.
Whether the reduced scope of hearing, should we also ponder on the point that whether the government should make public the basic criteria on which it considers an objection raised during hearing. So can there be certain guidelines that on what issues there will be public hearing?
Okay.
This question is raised by Aparna Vedula.
Okay. Okay, madam. I think there is a very valid point which is coming up in chatting also, that in most of the public hearing only hearing is given and no answers are given. Okay, because the typical answer, the typical dialogue we have in public hearing is, okay, we have noted the point and we'll come back to you. And as an EIA consultant, we are compelled to incorporate answers of all points in the EIA. But I think it is really essential to what you're saying, that kind of distinction is really essential. You know, what are relevant points for environment should be raised and should be answered in the hearing. What's happening right now is only points are heard, noted, and conveniently answered in writing. And in writing you can write any kind of answer because the other person is not in front to question what you answered. So I think this criteria is really essential, that what are relevant points in public hearing for that particular project and what are not. In many public hearings we have seen, we did one public hearing in Pend and half of the time was taken by local politician to just vent his way out. We can't control that, but I don't know. But if you go to control, then it again becomes the point of suppression of people's expression. So I think, yes, criteria should be noted down in the notification of specifically what is relevant and what is not relevant in public hearing.
Often, just from my experience also, I think this is a very, very important point, because often, like I said, if we are talking about project level EIs only and not talking about plan and policy level, then most of the public is often concerned about the policy or the plan itself. And so those questions then become sort of irrelevant to the project, and then the project proponent just answers them, because neither the project proponent nor anyone else has answers for that, because the plan and the policy is different and your project is different. So I have seen this happening quite considerably in sort of public exchanges, that the public is more talking about the large, unless the public or no, some member of the public is directly getting impacted. That's a very different kind of a questionnaire that happens. But if there is a general exchange happening, then it happens more on the plan and the policy of the government than on the project itself. So I think it needs really a big jump from how public hearings are held today.
Yeah, another important question is, we always see that we prepare a good policy, but both of you have agreed in your presentation that lack of monitoring, once you issue the certification, because of lack of monitoring, things go haywire. We don't achieve the objective of all the things what we have done. So can we specify the mechanism for monitoring in this case? Any of you can respond to it.
Yeah, if I could begin, I think this is exactly, so, all the opposition that is happening, I feel is slightly on another track. It is still talking about the clearance process itself, which we may we continue to tweak. We may make from 60 days to another 90 days, and we can continue to discuss about that. But not a single opposition point is really talking about how to set up the mechanism for compliance. And I think this is where I'm really, really concerned. Like I said, in 2006, it was extremely weak. It was almost non-existent. But in 2020, they have made some provisions, although like Hrishikesh mentioned, the 6 monthly compliance has made way for an yearly compliance. But again, I feel that it could be an early yearly compliance, but you make it so stringent. The audit should be specified how it is audited, who goes on site, who audits it, who is given the task to do that. Do you need third-party auditors for such kind of auditing mechanism? And that aspect is completely getting missed out in this whole noise against the EI notification. And that concerns me much more than reduction of timelines and small tweaks here and there. Because frankly, like I said, we may do excellent work prior to the project being built, but what happens once the project gets environmental clearance? And I think that needs some serious thought.
There
I
are
think Madam has covered that point very well. Yes, monitoring is weak, and that's what kills all good intentions.
Because for everything, like while giving the completion certificate, or you have already touched pre-certification of green building. So to what extent we can rely on these? We are giving certain exemptions on the basis of pre-certification of green building. So if you don't have any mechanism for monitoring, then the things go waste. You cannot achieve the objective of the policy.
Yeah. And
similar question has been raised by Mr. Rishi Raj. He is also touching that how to verify the green building certificate, because the local authorities, they don't have the trained technical manpower to do that job. So this is also very pertinent question. Then the cost of pollution control equipment. This is addressed to Rishikesh by Mr. Ashwini. Alike should be considered part of the project cost, as internalized cost as environment pollution is not anyone's right.
Yes, as per the EIA notification, definitely yes, but practically when we present to the environment committees, these costs are generally pulled out as environmental cost. But what he's saying is absolutely right. It is part of project description, which should come in chapter 2.
Just a point, I'm also seeing some comments, and I think just one clarification for the green building and what Rishikesh just mentioned, that some of these aspects could be completely missed out. But we have to also understand that in case of building construction, what has happened is that the municipal DCR are now becoming more and more stringent. A unified DCR is also on its way, and almost every cities and towns DCR has already mandated renewable energy, waste management, and STP. So in a sense, it is getting covered somewhere else. And I think that's the reason, one of the reasons that probably construction is being looked upon as something that can be not be MOEF's cup of tea. The second aspect that I also wanted to mention was the RERA. The RERA has brought in this, Rishikesh, you spoke about, for example, that people are incentivized to begin construction. But however, RERA has, plugged that. Plus, lending requirements of banks has plugged that. Today, I actually get phone calls from HDFC Bank, who is approving projects. I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but I get saying that, can you vet an EC for us? And I think the banks are now more and more averse to funding for projects which have not followed the law. So in that sense, the disincentive is also happening from the other side, although the penalty can always be looked upon as it shouldn't incentivize, definitely.
One of the participants has also touched that point. Can we relate the funding from banks to the projects if he fails to obtain environment clearance or environment permission? Shall this be inbuilt?
Yes, I think most, as Anya Madam mentioned, most of the banks do insist on that. We are doing due diligence of many projects which are now stopped at 30%, 40% because of lack of funding. And one of the major banks in India is doing this, and we are doing due diligence. So in the due diligence, obviously we go through the consent to establish, the environmental clearance, all permissions, and then if we find something, we suggest. But there was a huge debate, and there was a big seminar which happened in IIT also, where World Bank and everybody came. And the point is, all environmental aspects are covered by banks as one risk. Environmental non-compliance is considered by bank as one of the risks in the project. So the risks are compiled. Environment is not the only risk. There are many risks. Okay. So all the risks are compiled, and based on the risk, the interest rate is decided by the bank. Okay. If the risk is more, the interest rate goes up. So one of the bank people told me that what's the issue. Now, at the final negotiation, when the client is sitting with you, with the bank manager or whoever is the person, okay, and then he says कि HDFC तो मुझे 11% में दे रहा है, okay, तो ये जो environmental risk है ना, वो उस negotiation में निकल जाती है, and we are finding this when we are doing audits in many banks. Okay, finally, the bank person says, कुछ करके बिठा सकते हो क्या? Can you make it go through, because then it's my funding question.
Right.
So obviously we all are fighting through all these issues. Banks, we are our representation of what we want to do with our own money also. So yes, banks do definitely look at this kind of permissions. Unfortunately, this is one of the permissions. It's not the only permission.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, now even the banks consult RERA authorities whether a project has been registered with them or not before releasing their installments. So that way we are way forward. I think we have already exceeded the time, and I see the most of the questions are concerning the sincerity about the public hearing. How sincerely the public hearing is conducted. You suggested that it should be minimum 3 consultations at different stages. Probably if these kind of things are incorporated in the notification, that may resolve various questions being raised by the participants. Milind, what next?
Sir, I would request our guest of honor, Sri Pradeep Kapoor sir, to give his views regarding today's webinar and as far as EIA 2020.
Thank you. I have already said so many things,
Uh,
but I will appreciate the Maharashtra regional chapter of ITPI.
right,
At the right time, you have organized this webinar, and
right,
the right persons you have identified for making a very, very informative presentation. Both the
right.
speakers have made very informative presentations, and they have made your work easy, that they
Yes,
have given suggestions on what
right, sir.
points you can submit your objections to the ministry.
Yes, sir. Yes,
One or 2 points I wanted to say,
yes,
that the object of this notification is that it is proposed to bring more transparency and expedient disposal of such cases without dilution of the spirit of environmental improvement process. What the madam has suggested, that that shows that this notification fulfills the object for which it has been created, with some provisions which still need to be improved upon. And you made a very good presentation, because I have not seen the total notification in detail, but I could learn from this presentation a lot of issues. One thing which probably, because you may not be concerned with this, the qualifications for the members of any committee, I see that it's not only the experts. They have said that any postgraduate degree in science, commerce, arts, or law, or even the business administration or agriculture, horticulture, anybody and everybody is eligible to become a member of expert appraisal committee. Same is the case for other committees. I feel that we should have the experts in the committees, in such committees, then only we can achieve the objective of this notification. Rest of the issues we have already covered what I wanted to speak. I don't know what is the consideration for climate change in this notification. Probably Rishikesh has touched that point. It should be, and again, the cognizance of violation, but the monitoring aspect, I think still it's a very weak, which should be further strengthened. With this, once again, I extend thanks to both the speakers, Madam Anaga Paranjpe and Rishikesh Kolatkar, for making very informative presentation. And thank you very much. We on ITPI forum, we will bother you for other webinars also. Thank you very much.
okay. Thank you very much, sir, for your appraisal. Now, I would like to request our chief guest and President of ITPI, Dr. Sri Meshram sir, for giving his concluding remarks. Dr. D.S. Meshram sir, please.
Sir, unmute your mic.
Sir, please unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
it's audible.
Audible.
Okay. Thank you, Milind. And I should first congratulate the chairman of the Maharashtra Regional Chapter, Mumbai, Sri Jitendra Bhopreji, for organizing such an excellent webinar. Basically, there were so many doubts on the mind of the, not only on the general public, but also on technical personnel also, as far as this particular notification is concerned. And I should appreciate the lead taken by Milind Patil, Vice President ITPI, because he was the first person to contact me and say, sir, we are organizing this particular. Thank you, Milind. Thank you very much for taking the initiative. And
Yes, sir.
Sri Pradeep Kapurji, Secretary General ITPI, guest of honor, he has wholeheartedly supported the team of the Maharashtra Regional Chapter Mumbai for taking up this particular subject. And of course, the very learned two key speakers, those who have removed the doubts in our mind, really that is really praiseworthy. Specifically, Madam Anaga and Sri Rishikesh Polak, they have done the excellent job as per the presentation is concerned. Not only the presentation, but also removing some doubts which are in the mind of the people and some technical personnel also. Such kinds of the pro and against views will always emerge whenever such kinds of the notification comes, and we should take it very seriously. Reason being, it is always happens that some people will take in the positive sense, some of them will take always in the negative sense. But what we have to take is a balanced approach to be taken, because we cannot totally stop the development. We cannot 100% really safeguard the environment. So we have to take a balanced view, because we definitely cannot stop the development at all. When the development is stopped, economy will stop, and definitely that will have the impact as far as the ecology is also concerned. So we have to take a balanced view as far as the economy is concerned, as far as the environment is concerned, as far as the development is concerned. There are few issues raised by which are very important. For obtaining the issue, the environmental clearance, there are the stages which have been specified. First one is the carrying out the EC of the project, then creating the environment management plan, and third stage is holding a public hearing in which project in the area in which the project is implemented. We have seen that and we have participated in that. Public hearing is really a very very sensitive issue, because reason being is that not only the people, those who are concerned with this particular project and in which this particular project is being implemented, but there are so many people, those will come forward and talk so many things which are relevant also, and which are even irrelevant also as far the projects are concerned. But then definitely which are relevant, the issues are there that is required to be taken as per the public hearing is concerned. The Polatkar Saab has very much said, so many politicians have also made so many remarks and all this thing. Okay, that is always expected and we should give them the chance also. Madam Anaga has said, and she has specifically pointed out what were the deficiencies, rather the shortcomings. I should not say the deficiencies, but the shortcomings as far as the 2006 notification is concerned. And she has very specifically said in 2006 timeline was not clearly fixed, not clearly mentioned, not clearly adhered also. Then monitoring was very weak as per the 2006 notification is concerned, and procedures which were let down were not really in the true sense they were working, and that is why she said is that the notification 2020 is really the modification on the notification of the 2006. Specifically, she has said the monitoring of the EMP is, but she has said that the monitoring of the EMP is still weak. She wanted it to be more strengthened. Secondly, she has said that the notification still remains limited, but the larger issues of the climate change are required to be addressed in depth and clearly. That is what she said, and I do agree with her, because the climate change had not been adequately really addressed as far as this notification is concerned. The third issue she has said, the EIA are project level and total aspects of the similar kinds of the projects or the projects which are in the neighborhood, that total views are required to be taken. You cannot only take the view on the one project and then generalize it, definitely not. So you have to really consider the projects which are in the neighborhood of that particular project for which you are really preparing the EIA. she has mentioned and highlighted very important issues. At the cost of the repetition, I would like to see, underline few one. If the industry is coming in the industrial state, then the public hearing is not required. That is what she has said. It is really interesting to note down. Then the very important and relevant with the planning people is that elevated roads and flyovers in the municipal limits were exempted in 2006 are now added in 2021. So all the transport planners has to really be very serious on this particular issue and take the cognizance of this, because they have to really go for the EIA. The next important issue she has mentioned is the implementation should be strengthened. Project proponent commits so many things at the time of the preparation of the project, and that is required to be watched whether they are really implemented or not. That is very important issue Madam has raised, and that is required to be taken care of. Rishikesh has also raised a very important issue, that is it is possible to grow your economy without disturbing the ecology, and he has given the examples for that, how the China has taken over this particular specific issue, and that is also required to be adopted as far as India is concerned, because whenever we say that the economy is going to be economy is going to grow, it may be at the cost of the ecology, and he has very clearly mentioned that no, definitely not. Economy can be again grown without disturbing the ecology also, a very good point which he has really mentioned. Compliance now is yearly, which was earlier 6 months in the 2006 notification, but then it has got the positive side also, and it has got the negative side also. So we have to take a balanced view on this particular aspect. As far as the public hearing is concerned, he has given the 3 stages. The first one is before project start, second is the design is finalized, and third one is the during EIA. So as far as the public hearing, at all the 3 stages are required to be taken care of, and this is what he has mentioned, a very important issue he has really touched upon. Then he has raised a very important issue, that is, I will call it as an eminent domain. You must have heard this eminent domain word, because the government is supreme. And that is what he has stirred this particular issue when he says that the public hearing is exempted from all the projects concerning national defense and security aspects. And that is the total discretion of the central government. This is what was there in the earlier acts also, that we call it as the eminent domain, and the government is really important. We should give them chance, because they have to take the national perspective, which are the projects which are of the national importance and which are required to be taken. Otherwise, if you take a very short view and we say that no, central government should not take the view, to my mind, it is not really justified. Reason being is that they have to take a national important projects, and for such national important project, there should not be any objections, and that is why this eminent domain principle is required to be adopted. Once again, it was an excellent eye-opener by both the presenters, excellently done, and really it has opened my eyes, because I was having some doubts on certain issues which has been really clarified. Thank you, Milind, for choosing the eminent speakers and their eminent presentations and excellent presentation. Thank you very much for the Maharashtra regional chapter of the ITPI Mumbai. Thank you very much once again to all of you, and also to the speakers and also to the participants. Still, we have got more than 100 participants, which is unexpected so far, whatever webinars I have attended. Once again, credit goes to the host, Jitender Mopre, and Milind Patil, Vice President. Thank you very much.
Milind, unmute. Milind, unmute.
Thank you very much, sir, for your concluding remarks and enlightening speech. Definitely will improve ourselves also. Now the last thing is just vote of thanks. I would request our secretary, Sri Dhananjay Pawar, ITPI MRC, to give vote of thanks. Dhananjay Pawar.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. On behalf of the ITPI MRC Mumbai, I would like to thank today's chief guest, Dr. P.S. Mishra, President ITPI, for motivity, first to conduct the webinar on this live issue and complete the webinar. Also thankful for sparing their valuable time for us. I am also thankful to Sri Pradeep Kapoor, Secretary, for accepting our invitation for guest of honor and delegating their views. I also thankful to Sri Milind Patil, Vice President ITPI, for moderating the webinar in professional manner.
Not audible.
Dhananjay, not audible.
Chairman sir, you can conclude. Both of them. You can conclude. He is not audible.
Yeah. Thank you everyone. Thank you, President Sri Meshram sir. Thank you, Vice President Sri Milind Patil sir. Thank you, Secretary General Sri Pradeep Kapoor sir. Thank you, all senior council member. Thank you, the eminent speaker. Thank you, all the ITPI members, and thank you, all the participants for attending today's webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, the organizers. Now we can close. Admin, close.
Sure, sir.
Okay.